I'm going to quickly do a demonstration on how to fix the redirect loop that exists in Component Builder's front end. For example, if you use the summon distributor as a component, if you haven't set the permissions correctly, you would end up having a loop in the front end's view. That is because of a specific piece of code. Let me show you that. It is basically this piece of code here. Okay. And it is causing an error mainly because it is testing a view, preachers, whether the user has access to it. You see, we've got the preachers module open here. And then if it doesn't have access, it's redirecting it to preachers, which again will test whether preacher has access and again redirect to preachers. So this causes a loop. Now we have identified this as a bug, and the fix we've made is we are basically testing whether preachers and preachers here is the same value, and if it is, we are changing the redirect here to actually go back to the website's home page. Now that can still cause an error in the future if that home page has access permissions that are not public. So let's say you were to set preachers to the home page, it will still cause a loop and still not work. Basically that means we are going to try and ensure that it doesn't redirect to itself. So that was the first line of trying to fix the loop. The second one is you'll have to take care that the home page is publicly accessible, so that if it ends up, you know, that the default view of the component is not accessible by the public, then it will actually redirect it to the home page instead of just running into a loop. So the loop is simply created by the script. There's nothing more to it. Now with this new improvement, we've also made it possible for you to remove this check, basically to remove the control over whether a user has access to the view, and basically making the view permanently public. And I'm going to show you how to set up the permissions correctly, and I'm also going to show you in Component Builder how to remove this little section completely. So let's get to it. So inside a component, I have Sermon Distributor open. There is a tab called Settings, and then there is Site Views. We will then open the site views, and you'll see we have Preacher, Categories, Series List, and Sermon. And all of them have add access to set to yes. Now this access previously used to only mean that the access of an item, you know, when you say whether this is public or whatever, in the item itself is being added to the view or is being removed. Now we have linked the access checking whether the user has access to the component's view. Also we've linked it to this button. So if I was to take Preacher for example and set that to no, and then I'll leave Category to yes so we can see the difference, and click Save, and then click Save and Close. Then in the compiler I'm simply going to compile the Sermon Distributor component, and then I'm just going to install it on this website for now. We'll do it on a blank website in a moment, but I just want to show you the code difference here. So we go back to the code, and now we would see with the fix I've actually improved this feature. When it is checking for Preacher, since preachers, let me just show you again, going back to the component, and then Settings, Site View, you see that the default view is Preachers. it's set to yes. You can only set one of these as the default, and if you set more, it'll use only the first it gets. So we've set preachers to be the default view, and so if we were going back to the code, we would basically have had a loop here if we were to redirect back to preachers, right? So what we're doing instead is we are redirecting to the root URL, which in that case being the home page, if the person or user doesn't have access to the default view. Now let's open series, for example, and then we'll see that it checks for series, and then it redirects. If the user doesn't have access, it redirects it to preacher. So if it gets to preacher and the user doesn't have access, it will now redirect to the home page. That is the fix we've made. So there won't be any loops. Whereas if we go to the one that we removed, we said none of that to be added, you'd see that there is no more. If we look at series, it's getItems, and then user, and then it's that permission block. Whereas with preacher we unset it, right? So it gets user, and that permission block is not there. It simply removed it. So that means that preacher in this case is a permanent public view and can be accessed by any public user, and so that is how to ensure that a view will be always public. But if you want to retain this permissional structure and you want to control who has access to which view, then this is what you need to do with a blank install. Once again, I'm going to compile Sermon Distributor, and then I'm going to go to a blank or an empty website, which I'm using to test components sort of on a blank install. So I'm copying that URL because I'm in my local network. So here is that blank install, and I'm simply going to install it from the URL. Say check and install, and it is successfully installed Sermon Distributor. Now I'm gonna go to menus and set the home page to one of Sermon Distributor's views. Okay, I've set preachers to being the default page of the Joomla website. If I was to load the home page now, we'll get that loop error because the home page is the same place as the view, the default view, and we have not made the default view accessible to a public user as yet. So let me illustrate that. So as you can see, it says the page isn't redirecting properly. Now let's go back to the back end and then go to Sermon Distributor, then going to options, then going to permissions and make sure it's set to public, and then let's do a search for site, categories access, category access, preacher access, and preachers access. Okay, I'm going to only change this one. You see all the others are not allowed, but this preacher's site access I'm going to say allow. And if I was to refresh the home page now, it says that is the old error, so we can close that, and you'll now see it's actually loading the preachers. It just hasn't found any preachers. There isn't any preachers in the system yet. So if I would just save and close here, just quickly create a dummy preacher, then give it a dummy sermon, and if I refresh it now, you see it opens demo as a preacher. If I open it, it's going to tell me no, you're not authorized to view preacher. Okay, if I clicked on it, you see I clicked on it and it says you can't go there. Why? because I haven't set the permissions. That's as simple as that. So go back to sermons, click on options, again public, again do a search for site, and then go down to preacher single, and then permitted. If I was to click there now, there it's loading it. So it's loaded the preacher and it's only sermon it has, and I can click on open. But then if I click on open, it's gonna again give me that error. So I need to, for sermon as well, set its permissions. So if I search to sermon, okay, there's sermon access. Let's allow that as well. Okay, let's try this again. So open the preacher, open the sermon, and there we go. Now it's loading as you would expect, and it's working. And that was simply because you now have rights that you can say certain groups have access to certain pages and others simply doesn't have access. And that's how the permissional structure works. There's really no error with the page when it sort of runs into a loop. It simply does that because the permissional structure was previously redirecting to a default page, which could end up being a home page, and that could cause a loop. Okay, I hope this will be helpful for those of you that have been struggling with this feature. Please, there is an issue on GitHub at the moment, and if you have any further questions, you're welcome to jump in and just note it there. Let me just show you that issue. It's issue number 29, user check on getItems. I've already responded to this request, and now next, as a help, I'm gonna post this video here as a link so that we can make sure that that we can solve this issue. Obviously the fix that I've shown you just now will only come out, as I explained here, with the next release. The next release might only be next week sometime. I mean, it's end of the year, guys. I'm actually taking a break. Okay, thanks for watching.